It's on.
Yeah, push the button.
Hello.
Is mine on? Yep.
No, it's. I had it on. All right, now everybody can hear me. I'd like to welcome everybody. If we could please stand for the pledge. Donnie? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I just have a few comments, and then we're going to go right to our presentation with Christy. So next month in January, we're kind of looking at off and on bad weather, so we didn't want to have a presentation that month. So the next on January will be a business meeting that starts at 6. If you want to be there, you're more than welcome to be there. Right now, we've picked 4 days or 4 months that we're going to plan on having a presentation, and that's March, May, September, November. However, several people have come to me in the past couple of days with ideas of other presentations, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to fill a whole lot of slots. Again, we'll probably try to stay away from the early months of winter, but starting in March, we'll get back with our presentations. And one of the most interesting ones, well, they're all interesting, but I should say one of the more fun ones that we're trying. We just sent a raw movie to one of the companies to have it digitized, and it was a 1969 presentation by the faculty at Lower Paxton Junior High School, and I think it's called Where the Gold Can Be Found. So it'd be kind of fun for anybody that was alumni there to see some of the teachers from back in '69, my father being one of those. That's how I actually found the canister of film. So if everything comes back, it's a silent film, and I thought we thought we would make like a little movie night here and show it on the screen. So we're looking forward to that. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to our presentation. Are you all set? All right, she's ready.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Christy Kessler. I am one half of the research committee for the commission. The other half is sitting up front, Denise Daimler. And if I erroneously say something, she will correct me, though she hopes not to have to, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, this evening, we thought we would try and bring everyone up to date on how a lot of the land here in Pennsylvania was acquired through the years. Now, I'm sure all of you know and have heard in history, William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania. Well, interestingly enough, his father was owed a lot of money from King Charles II of England. King Charles, in turn for this, gave the son William a charter, which is actually found at the State Museum, where I worked years ago, so I'm familiar with it to a certain extent. And that charter granted William Penn a lot of land here in Pennsylvania. So, sight unseen, he started selling land to people in order to help pay debts at one point, and of course, to make money. Now, the territory itself was west of the Delaware River, between New York on the north and Maryland on the south. So all of this initially started March 4th of 1681. Now, in April of 1681, Penn decided he was going to start publishing and promoting the initial tracts here in this vast country. So an example, the top part of one of these, is right here on the screen, and it's called A Brief Account of the Province of Pennsylvania and Some Account of the province of Pennsylvania in America. Now, this was preceded by a map of the south and east bounds of Pennsylvania in America, and it was published at the end of March that year. Now, also in 1681 in April, William Penn appointed his cousin, William Markham, as the deputy governor of what was to become Pennsylvania. And Markham, at that point then, came over. Now, Markham was the acting governor of the province of Pennsylvania, while Penn stayed in England. William Penn did not initially come over here, so he had no idea whatsoever of what he was selling to people. He just knew it was a lot of land. So anyway, Markham served from 1681 until William Penn finally came over in 1682. And then when Penn went back, he served again from 1683 to 1699. And interestingly enough, William Markham was amongst a group of people called the first purchasers of Pennsylvania, and he owned around 5,000 acres of new land. And as I said, he had no idea what he bought. It was sight unseen. Now, a few of William Markham's duties in the position that he acquired, he was to create a council consisting of 9 people, of which he was in charge of. And one of his duties, he was to read his letter and the King's Declaration to the inhabitants of the new country and take their acknowledgement of his authority and proprietorship. Also, he was to settle the boundaries between William Penn and his neighbors. Now, Markham negotiated with Lord Baltimore, or started the negotiations, over the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania, but he never had a chance to complete those negotiations. Now, moving along then, in July 11th of 1681, there was a formal agreement made between William Penn and the people who became the first purchasers. Now, this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, an original copy of a page showing you some of the first names of the first purchasers. This was on parchment, probably calf or sheepskin, and written in what was called iron gall ink. Iron gall ink, also known as common ink, standard ink, oak gall ink, or iron gall nut ink, is a purple, black, or brown-black ink made from iron salts and tannic acids from vegetable sources. And this ink is still used today for some documents. Now, this particular listing in the book it's in is currently stored at the Pennsylvania Archives, which, for those of you who aren't aware, is no longer in the building that was attached to the State Museum. They have since built a new structure, and it has moved. I'm not sure of the address, but you can go to the website and look any of this information up. Now, the document itself, the entries include, see if I can do this, the purchaser's name, such as you see right here, Philip Ford. It also shows the location of their home, their occupation, and the amount of acreage that they obtained being a first purchaser. Now, upon receiving the grant for Pennsylvania, William Penn, of course, set about attracting investors and settlers to pay expenses and to realize a profit from this particular enterprise. He had to sell land. So the first purchasers gave him an infusion of money that he needed, and the people who emigrated provided people to clear their land and begin the process of settlement. Now, the first purchasers bought land directly from William Penn before 1685. Most of them were from England, all over the British Isles, especially the London area, and were largely middle-class tradesfolk. All the members were of the Religious Society of Friends, otherwise known as we do today as Quakers, and by 1685, some 600 individual tracts were sold, making up 700,000 acres of Pennsylvania's land. The second interesting point is, when these people bought land, the tracts of land ranged anywhere from 125 acres to 10,000 acres. Now, most of the purchasers bought increments of 125, 250, 500, or 1,000 acres each, with the most common size being 500 acres. Penn wanted the settlers not to hold the land vacant for speculation, so he stipulated that tracts over 1,000 acres would not be laid out unless they were settled within 3 years. In addition to this, each purchaser received gratis a lot or lots in the layout of Philadelphia and its adjoining Liberties area in the ratio of 1 city acre for each 50 in their rural purchase that they made. So you bought 500 acres, you got 1 city acre for every 50 acres out of that 500. So you ended up with a lot of land, other land in that area. The purchasers were buying rights to the land, not a specific tract though, because as I said earlier, they had no idea what was there and what they bought. It was sight unseen. So they didn't get to choose what they were buying. Now, we also included in here that when they paid £1 for each 50 acres. And later on, I'll tell you what the equivalent of pounds and so on back then were compared to what they would have been today. They also paid what was called an annual quit rent rate, which was the rent due to William Penn. And this rate was 1 shilling per 100 acres on the land they purchased, and 1 penny per acre on rented land was charged. So I guess you could say that the Penn family at the time was double dipping. Now, this particular map is what we call our genealogical map of the counties. In 1682, William Penn arrived in America. He negotiated the first land purchase with the tribe of Delaware people called the Lenape. Pennsylvania was divided into 3 counties. Does anyone know what the earliest 3 counties were in our state?
Philadelphia, Chester, and Bucks.
Philadelphia, Chester, and
Bucks.
bingo! He wins the prize. Good, I didn't have to go through that one anyway. All right. Then, on May 10th of 1729, they created Lancaster County. Now, if you look at our map, if you see that blue arrow, where that comes down, that's the westernmost portion of Chester County. right?
That blue arrow is Dauphin County.
All right, well, it also shows the western portion of Chester, doesn't it? Dauphin County? All right, well, I made a boo-boo. All right, it's Dauphin County, excuse me. Anyway, at this time, the county was subdivided and additional townships were laid off, which happened to include what they called back then Pesh Tank, or later known as Paxton Township. Just a little side note, which we found very interesting. As settlement increased through Pennsylvania, 6 other counties were formed from territory taken from Lancaster County. York County in 1749, Cumberland County in 1750, Berks in 1752, Northumberland in 1772, Dauphin in 1785, and Lebanon in 1813, all from portions of Dauphin and Lancaster counties. And then from there, the counties continued to grow. The last new county created before the Revolutionary War was Westmoreland County, which is, I believe, right there. And that was done in 1773. And Denise is right, I didn't get that far. The blue arrow that was on the map points to the area in which Dauphin County was carved out of on March 4th, 1785. In August of 1787, excuse me, legislature separated Paxton Township into Upper Paxton, Middle Paxton, and Lower Paxton Townships. All right, now we get into the whatnots of obtaining land in Pennsylvania. The first step was what was called the application. This was a brief letter requesting X amount of land. It was usually a slip of paper. Interestingly enough, it did not normally bear the applicant's handwriting or signature. What this was, it was an application from interested prospective settlers in Pennsylvania, but it rarely contained any information about that particular applicant except the name of the applicant, the acreage, and the general location of the land that they desired. Now, under Commonwealth policy, applications became a more formalized document, but the contents, as with anything else, in the application changed a little, except that land had to be specified as either improved or unimproved lands. Anyone have any idea what that means? Improved or unimproved?
Improved would have structure,
It could be that, or what else?
farmland.
It could be they could have cleared the most minuscule amount of area on their property, cleaned it up. That was considered improved. It didn't necessarily have to be a structure. They could have chopped down 6 trees to make room for a little field. That's improvement. Unimproved was the land as it was when they got there. That's the difference. Now, applications were then submitted to the land office. Now, the land office was run by a secretary of propriety affairs. Part of the land office was run by James Logan, who was appointed by William Penn, 1674. Now that's his date of birth and his death. Never mind. He was appointed the Secretary of Proprietary Affairs. he originally held the responsibility for directing the operations of the land office. He oversaw the warranting and patenting of tracts, and he would send the warrant to the Surveyor General to have the land in question surveyed. Thomas Home was appointed as Surveyor General of the province under William Penn's direction. He laid out the plan of the city of Philadelphia, part of what you see on the screen, and produced the first detailed map of the settled parts of the province, which was published in 1687. And this particular map you're looking at was called, and if you can see some of the spelling at the top, it's very interesting, a map of ye improved part of Pennsylvania in America, divided into counties, townships, and lots. The map also makes reference to the settlement of several inhabitants, landholders' names, in the counties of Chester, Bucks, and Philadelphia. Now, except for the Revolutionary War years, the Land Office of the Commonwealth has operated continuously since William Penn arrived in Pennsylvania in 1682. In 1981, the land records and the functions of the office were transferred to the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Many of the records have since been scanned and are now searchable online at the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission website. All right, the second step in acquiring land. There was a process called the warrant, which was a written order, and it initiates the title of a property. So, say you're a settler coming to the New World. You had to obtain a warrant before moving onto a tract of land. The warrant provided the basis for legal settlement, but does not convey all rights to the property. And the interesting thing is, there were a lot of instances of what you would call squatters. They had no rights to the property, but because they might be there for X number of years, they thought it was theirs and they could stay there. But they didn't have a warrant right away. The applicant, who also became known as the warrantee, had the right to settle on the land and improve it by erecting dwellings, raising crops, and they could even transfer the property to another person by a will or by sale. Now, this is an example of a warrant to survey. There were 3 kinds of warrants. This is the first one. And this was the most common one used under William Penn's policy, and the most common one that Denise and I have seen through all the research we've done for our township. Instead of surveying the land first and selling lots by the plan, William Penn adopted the practice of selling warrants for a quantity of land to be located. Again, the mystery, not knowing what you were getting. Now, during the Penn brothers' time, and John, Thomas, and Richard were William Penn's sons by his second wife. Yes, he was married twice. His first wife had 2 sons and a daughter. One, I believe, died young. Am I correct? Oh, he had 4 children by his first wife that died young. Okay, he was very busy. And Interestingly enough, these sons to his second wife gained proprietorship through their father, whereas the son to the first wife was given land by his father, but he never had proprietary rights in anything. Is that correct?
The sons, John, Thomas, and Richard, through their mother.
Oh, through their mother. That's right. I'm sorry. Because she took over after William Penn died, and she pretty much was served as governor in his stead after his death. And then the sons acquired their proprietorship through her. There's a lot of things about William Penn that people don't know, and hopefully we will do something about him down the road, and it should be very interesting. He was quite an interesting character. And again, due to the warrant of survey, back to that, as I had mentioned earlier, there were two categories of land established: improved or unimproved. And the improved land was land which was settled in any way, shape, or form. Unimproved land were lands that were considered vacant and there was no improvement done on them. Now, warrant to survey is the second of the three warrants that we were able to find. The warrant to survey happened when the land office received an application and the fee. They issued a warrant or an order to have the particular tract that that person wanted surveyed. That was called the warrant to survey in this case. This was 150 acres of land, including improvements, and it also tells what other lands owners adjoined the lands that this person was looking to have surveyed. The first part of the warrant on this one reinstated the information from the application. The person, being an individual or another entity, was purchasing the land, the acres of land that they were requesting, if it included an improvement, and general descriptions of where the land was situated, including, as in this case, adjoining landowners. Now, typically, and here we get into more money again, it included the purchase price, usually 15 pounds, 10 shillings for every 100 acres, and quit rent, which was typically 1/2 penny sterling for every acre thereof. Now, if the warrant was issued by the proprietors to a squatter, it included the interest and yearly quit rent was to commence, typically, corresponding to the year of the actual settlement that the squatter provided. The quit rent amount was to be paid to the proprietors forever. Now, most of these warrants stated the terms of sale to be met within a given period, usually 6 months, and these conditions remained the same under Commonwealth policies. Now, some warrants included, for instance, provided that the same land, what they were asking, did not lie in or interfere with an area called the Manor of Conestoga or any other of our appropriated tract. Now, some historians believe that the area originally called the Manor of Conestoga, being Chester County, was set aside as a domain in which the Indians could live and hunt. It contained 16,000 acres east of the Susquehanna River. One thing which made this area vastly different from other localities in Lancaster at this period was the existence of the Indian reservation called Indiantown, established by William Penn. It remained there until December of 1763, when the Paxton boys invaded the reservation and massacred the few remaining Indians. Now, the first, and this is very interesting, this goes back to one thing I had mentioned earlier. The first warrant issued in present-day Lower Paxton, Dauphin County, was on January 10th, 1737, to John Gilchrist, and their name was spelled many different ways. It got confusing initially till we figured all this out. He requested 400 acres of land lying on Paxton Creek. Does everyone know where Paxton Creek is? Okay. In Paxton Township, whereon improvements have been made. 7 years in the said county of Lancaster. He agreed to pay the sum of £15, 10 shillings for every 100 acres and the yearly quit rent of 1/2 penny sterling for every acre thereof. As a result of the survey of the tract, they discovered it was actually 444 acres with the allowance, and later a patent was granted for that tract to John Gilchrist on May 17th, 1745. So, as of now, that is the earliest warrant that we know of that was issued in our township. Now, as far as the currency goes, a pound was the currency of Pennsylvania until 1793. 1 pound equaled 20 shillings. 12 pence equaled 1 shilling. In November of 2023, according to the International Currency Exchange Rate, 1 pound equals $1.22 USD. So, 15 pounds, 10 shillings equals $18.37, or 18 cents an acre. Now, another source, and this one Denise found also, according to the historians of Johannes Buck, Christian and Catherine Buck and their descendants compiled in 1958. In the 1770s, a pound in Pennsylvania was worth $3.24, which, if true, then 15 pounds 10 shillings equaled $50.22, or 50 cents an acre. Now, the third warrant, and we haven't had a lot of luck finding examples of some of these. It was called a warrant to accept. And under the Penn Brothers proprietorship, this particular warrant and another one called the warrant of entry were issued. And this was done in an attempt to regulate the settling of lands and to receive payment from squatters who settled before 1754. Now, the warrant to accept was granted after a survey was conducted on a tract of land. The survey could not be disputed. And if you look on the right side of the slide, you'll see the warrant to accept. The first part of the warrant identified the application number, the applicant's name and date location, in which an order was issued to survey for the requested tract of land, being the number of acres and if improved, and the adjoining landowners. The reason for the request, well, some reasons included that the land was transferred to another person by a will or by sale. Purchase money, typically £5 sterling per 100 acres, along with the interest and yearly quit rent amounts, were to be paid. Now, the yearly quit rent amount, if the warrant was issued, Penn's family proprietorship typically got 1 penny sterling for every acre thereof forever. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania included with the interest thereon due, agreeably to an act of assembly, passed the 9th day of April in 1781, an act titled An Act for Establishing a Land Office, and all of this helped to regulate all of these various entities at the time. Now, the warrant of entry, which unfortunately as yet we have not found any examples of this type of warrant in present-day Lower Paxton Township. This warrant was assumed as a warrant that had previously been granted to another person. And at this point in time, that's really all we know about that particular warrant. Unless, did you find anything else out about it?
Yeah, it occurred a lot if the land office lost the original warrant and they couldn't find it, so they reproduced one.
Well, let's hope they didn't lose too many or they were kept quite busy at the office. All right, the survey is the third step in the process. This is when the deputy surveyors and their crew physically went out, measured, and marked the land. Now, when a warrant to survey was issued, orders were sent to the Surveyor General, who then would assign a deputy surveyor of the county listed on the warrant to do the work. That deputy surveyor and his crew, which included axemen and chainmen, completed the surveys for the lands being purchased. During the surveying process, the axemen would work ahead of the surveying crew. They would clear the trees and the underbrush. The chainmen then measured the distances by running horizontal lines along the ground according to the directions given them by the deputy surveyor. He then manipulated the compass, which noted the courses in degrees and the distances between the corners. The deputy surveyor drew the plat on a piece of paper, noting the acreage in the tract, which he calculated from his notes, adjoining owners and markers. He would then sign the survey, send it back to the Surveyor General's office. Now, in 1711, the province established a regular set fee for securing lands, and I'm sure many of you have noticed the difference between then and now in process, monies, everything. It's so different. Anyway, afterward, surveying fees in Pennsylvania followed a general pattern, although legislature adjusted the precise rates from time to time. By 1752, surveying up to 100 acres cost 7 shillings and 6 pence. The former British monetary unit equal to 6 pennies. Every additional 100 acres costs 3 shillings. Buyers paid surveyors 2 pence per mile for traveling and 6 shillings 6 pence for returning the survey to the land office. The chain carriers worked for 3 shillings per day. And the land office collected 5 shillings to check whether a warrant for land was clear of other claims and demanded 19 shillings to file a return of survey on the property. So there's a lot of money changing hands back then. Deputy surveyors drew these fees in the field, and the surveyor general obtained a proportion of the funds they collected. At mid-century, though, the surveyor general received 1/3 of his deputy's earnings. Now, this shows you some of the tools they used. The compass on the left is the one I mentioned earlier, being how they determine courses, directions, and so on in degrees. The bottom 2 tools are the axes used by the axemen. The chain is what was laid on the ground and how they helped measure distance and so on. Now, before 1750, there weren't a lot of local instrument makers, and surveyors relied on English manufacturers for their tools, which included the circumferentor or the surveyor's compass, Gunter's chain, which was exactly 22 yards or 66 feet long and divided into 100 links, usually marked off into groups of 10 by brass rings, and also a level, which was used for establishing the horizontal plane, and a plane table. Now, this is an example of a survey sketch. This shows you the boundaries. I get to play again. Okay, boundaries of a particular area. It also shows you the courses and distance of those boundaries with an exact determination of total acreage. In the middle, you see it says 206 and, is that an eighth? I can't read the fraction. With an allowance, as they used to say, of 6%, 1/2, an allowance. The allowance being what they called 6% for roads, road building. It also showed the adjoining owners and markers which were completed by the deputy surveyors. Now, tracts of land were measured along the ground, but corner marks were usually emblazoned on trees, preferably hardwoods such as hickory, chestnut, or oak. They also used, and it's funny when you read the old deeds, they'll talk about a pile of stones or a heap of stones in a corner that marked a corner boundary. They used posts, and those were some of the more common land markers, and sometimes on the survey sketches, they showed small depictions of trees or other markers. Now, under the policy of the Commonwealth, a diagram was also to include depictions of all streams, and on this one, those little wavy lines over to the right side of the tract designate streams, roads, railroads, canals, and a listing of township and county lines. In addition to landmarks, the surveyor also noted all adjoining owners and vacant lands on the map. Lines belonging to adjoining tracts that had already been surveyed were considered fixed and could not be adjusted. And this was imperative for preparing connected warrant tract maps. Now, this is what is usually at the bottom. When we find these surveys, it's all on one page. The map at the top, this description is at the bottom. This is drawn up by the deputy surveyor. It includes the date of the survey, all the relevant warrant information, and the usual allowance of 6% for roads and highways. A 10% allowance, which was later decreased to the 6%, was originally allowed for roads and highways. Also, each acre in an entire tract with the 6% allowance actually included 169.6 square perches rather than the standard 160 square perches. An overplus of more than 10% of the land listed on the warrant was not permitted. By virtue of the allowance, public roads were later laid out without compensation for the land taken. This is part of the Dauphin County Lower Paxton Township warranty map. The area that you see circled in red was a tract of land surveyed for Reverend Joseph Montgomery. It contained 206 acres and 80 perches. The warrant for the land was done on August 6th of 1784. The survey was done in February of 1785. Once all of this was done, a patent to Reverend Joseph Montgomery was issued in June of 1787. And this particular patented area was named Bloomsbury. And there were some tracts, as you can see on the map, ended up with names. The one below it was called Duncan's Partnership. Other tracts were not given names. Now, as I just explained, or related to you, the name of the individual who received the grant, the date the land was warranted and surveyed, including the survey book information, and that is the number at the top, C129-237. You can find that information if you go online. It's very easy. The property dimensions being the acreage, and then the patent information, and also the patent book location. In this case being P1019, page 195. Okay? And if, as I relate to you, the property was given a title by the owner, in this case, Bloomsbury. Now, warrants and patents were indexed only in the name or names of the party until 1907, when the Department of Internal Affairs was authorized to prepare maps showing the location of all connected warranty, patentee tracts. The fourth step in all of this process is called the return. This is an internal document. It's a written restatement, and it combines the warrant and survey in paragraph form with all the information needed to prepare a patent, which was sent by the Surveyor General to the Secretary of the Land Office. This was done once the signed results of the survey were returned to the Surveyor General. He would then check all his deputies' work for accuracy and to make sure that the acreage agreed upon with the warrant. The return also signifies the purchase price and all outstanding interest and fees have been paid to the Receiver General of the Land Office. Now, the Act of April 9, 1781, the office of the Receiver General was abolished in 1809, and his records, powers, and duties were transferred to the Secretary of the Land Office. In 1843, the powers and duties of the Secretary of the Land Office were transferred to the Surveyor General. In the Act of January 1st, 1874, the duties of the Surveyor General devolved upon the Secretary of Internal Affairs. The last and final step in the whole process is how people obtained particular tracts in our township. It was called the patent. And this was the final official deed. This came from the Pennsylvania colonial proprietor or state government, and it conveyed a clear release and title to the requested tract of land to its purchaser or purchasers or patentee. It is sometimes referred to as a first title deed. And in some instances, the patentee gave a name to a tract of land which might indicate their original European where they came from. After the Secretary of the Land Office drew up the patents, he sent them to the Master of Rolls to be recorded. Though the position of Master of Rolls was abolished in 1809, and this is the top part of a patent that we had found. Now, in 1715, the Recorder of Deeds office was created. Each county was given complete control over and responsibility for maintaining its own deed books, which was formerly done by the Master of Rolls. Deeds transferring land titles between private citizens, either before land applications and warrants or after the patenting process, are maintained in this office for the appropriate county. And that is how everything came into being in Pennsylvania up through and until Lower Paxton Township. Everything started with applications, worked its way up through to the patents, which is what gave final first title to landowners. And that is the end. Denise and I are very willing to take any questions.
Including commission members.
Of course.
When did the Penn family stop the double dipping? Like, when did you own the land and have to stop paying rent?
Go ahead, Denise.
When they until the
Oh, once we became our own country, we set our own rules and the double
Right.
dipping ended.
and then the
Okay.
Penns lost all the land. Now, they were re-encompassed for some of them because they had personal manors. But there was, from day one, there was a struggle with them getting the quick rent from a lot of people. They even actually had one deputy
yeah.
governor quit because their sheriffs and a big controversy occurred trying to get the monies owed.
I thought you could hear me. Denise found out that during the reign of,
King William,
that's the one. Go ahead, tell him. You know, she reads my mind. Go ahead.
he actually, because he had controversy with King William's, his charter was revoked for 2 years. And Pennsylvania was then a royal colony, and the governor of New York handled it.
Yeah. How many of you have been to the State Museum downtown? All right. Are you familiar with the first floor where the William Penn statue is? All right. Now, I could be wrong, but at the time I worked there, there was a wall right behind the statue. Behind that, in a case, is the original Penn Charter. And it's interesting because, as Denise and I have found through a lot of our research, when you get into the older handwritten deeds, it gets very interesting trying to decipher what they were writing because F's were S's. Like map on the one was spelled with two P's. They would double up on consonants, skip vowels. So it gets very interesting when you're looking for all of this and trying to also translate what you're reading. So, anybody else? Any other takers?
The only thing I would say is, it's always amazed me at how accurate these old surveyors were.
Yeah.
I mean, with that chain and, I mean, you look at those old maps and they're right on. You know, the one thing doesn't change over time are the creeks. You know, the creeks are, are generally where they've been, and you go look at those old maps where they have the property dots, and they're right on.
Yeah, some of them have dried up. Very few, though.
And some of the creeks have actually changed.
Thank you very much. That was excellent.
Sorry
Very-
if I put anybody to sleep.
No, it was excellent. I learned a lot. So as we move forward, two other things, or one other thing that I wanted to mention. As you leave, if you look to your right, out these doors, we're starting to fill in the showcases that are out there. And so those are items that we have from the Historical Commission, and one of them being a magazine from 1764, and one of the articles in that was about the Paxton boys. No, Paxton Rangers, I apologize. And I thought that was pretty interesting. We'll get the third case filled up here soon. So please enjoy that. Are there any committee member comments? Are there any public comments? With that, may I ask for an adjournment?
I recommend we adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, and have a happy holiday.